Hola, chicas. Welcome to Encuentras Your Voice podcast, the vocal piece of Encuentras Media, to bring you all the hits and highlights of what is happening in the world of all things Latina. I'm your host, Consuelo Crosby, Peruana, structural engineer, mother, and Scorpio energy Latina, ready to hold the mic for you to share your valuable story of living in your authenticity and the success that it brings you. Join our sassy guests as they proudly share how it started, how it's going, and where they are headed to support and encourage the comunidad to amazing success. Your voice is powerful, and it's time we kick it up to maximum volume for everybody to hear. You want representation? Then you have come to the perfect comfort zone. Relax into this and feel a major part of something big, bold, and beautiful. Coming to you every Wednesday, 5 p.m. California time, but available to you anywhere in the world because our Latinidad is global. Love having you here, so sit back now and join the fun. Hola, chicas! Welcome to our newly rebranded podcast, Encuentras Your Voice, the evolution of the Lifelings podcast, as we lean into the Latina journey to discover the power of authenticity and the success that follows. I'm your host, Consuelo Crosby, coming to you on this Valentine's Day, sending out all the love for a year filled with the people who see you, support you, and fuel your journey. No negativity here. No reason to hang on to what's weighing you down. So let it go. And as you will hear today, that is exactly what our special guest, Chloe Caudillo, Latina filmmaker, writer, and director, encourages each of us to strive for as she leads us through her own journey, starting from the little chica growing up in DeKalb, Illinois, writing creative stories to feel empowered in a world where she was not enough in either culture. Already sounding familiar? You don't have to be a filmmaker to write this story, right? And yet, following her passion of storytelling, wherever it led her, New York, Chicago, and ultimately Los Angeles, where she was awarded a Los Angeles Latino International Film Festival Fellowship, sponsored by Netflix, to bring her film development to life. The film created from her most authentic voice. You will feel seen in this episode, maybe even track the moments when you may have wanted to quit your own dream journey. Yet Chloe will remind you of all the reasons to keep going. In her own words, let go of what it looks like, or what it's supposed to look like, or what it's supposed to be, and just be present in your life and on your path. Now, those are words you can repeat to yourself daily to be free of expectations and love who you are and what you do authentically, because there's no one else in the world like you. Chloe's the perfect guest to kick off our newly rebranded podcast, Encuentras Your Voice, because we are all about authenticity. Authenticity is your superpower, and once you find it, discover it, lo encuentras, it will lead you to the success and happiness that you have been working so hard to create. And in that authentic voice, you are heard, empowered, and things really begin to happen. So get comfy, lean in, and join the conversation with Chloe Caudillo, Latina writer, director, and ultimate filmmaker, as she shares her journey and some teasers on what's ahead for her. Welcome to Encuentras Your Voice podcast, our first episode on this new name, and so happy to have Chloe Caudillo share her time and her journey with us today, and so honored that you have joined us. So why don't you chime in and tell us a little bit about your upbringing, your heritage, and get us going on who is Chloe Caudillo.
Yeah, so I'm a 1.5 generation Chicana. I was born in a little corn town called DeKalb, Illinois, which is like 60 miles west of Chicago. My mom's from Mexico, from Matamoros, Tamaulipas. And my dad was born here, but his dad's from Mexico. His mom was Tejana. So like fully Latina heritage, but definitely the generational, like having one parent who's an immigrant, one parent born here. And my grandpas had passed away, by the time I was born. But the matriarchs were my abuelas. And one was, we call her Macho, which is kind of my mom's mom, and the other is Nana. But I think just coming from seeing the two sides really lift these women, and they were very strong and independent, and they had both at different parts of their lives left their husbands after having kids and, started their own journey. So when I was growing up, they were dating and were pretty independendent. So I think that's something, I'm just putting that out there because that's not conventional. I have a little sister, so we always talk about how that that's kind of affected our worldview, just having all these independent women. And our mom is the same. She, came here at 21 to the US, worked in a factory most of my life. And then she was a hairstylist. So she would cut hair in our basement growing up. There'd always be these Spanish speaking people coming to the door asking for corte, señora reina. And we didn't appreciate it at the time, she really believes in what she does now. She has her own business, which is going on almost, I want to say 18 or 19 years in our hometown.
Wow. Yeah.
So just someone who never really, she kind of blazed her own trail, never really took what other people might have put on her, perception wise. So I think that is something that has obviously had fueled my own path as well. Mm-hmm. So my parents are still together and they're super supportive, and I give them a lot because they, I think our family's a little unconventional. I'm super unconventional, and they support us and they love us.
What was it like for you growing up in a small town in Illinois?
My first language was Spanish, but they threw me into an all English school. So I remember feeling so, ashamed of my accents, and in both cultures, actually, because then I would go to misa on the weekends, and those kids would also, they're like, oh, you say this word funny. So both cultures kind of rejected me. And, it's so confusing when you're a kid and you don't really understand it. So if I was, I think for me, I really, I suppressed a lot, I really, didn't want to speak up, but I really gravitated towards writing and drawing, and that became my voice. And I've always been a storyteller. Ever since I was little, I would, I was always gravitated towards these outsider stories, and I would write my little versions of them as well.
Were you creating your world when you were doing that? The world you wanted to be in?
Yeah, they're just the world, I felt. I didn't realize, but these, sci-fi, horror, these kind of outsider, fantastical stories, it's in a way how I felt, but I couldn't put a name to it. I couldn't really show it, but these fantastical stories kind of, they kind of showed what I felt like. Mm-hmm. When I was little, I would write the stories and I'd draw little pictures. And now that I'm a director, that's called storyboarding. So I was doing that as a child, not even knowing, it was just something I did. So my whole life, this is always in the background of me writing, creative writing, doing arts. I was always artistically inclined. But it was never something that was encouraged. I never knew you could have a job doing that. Mm-hmm. And so when I went to college, there's definitely this pressure to go into a real major.
First gen Latina history.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I think I was pre-med for... I think I was trying to be pre-med for one semester, and then I switched to psychology, which is good. I think... I was learning about myself, so it was cool to study that. And I think it's just been useful to learn about people and cultures. And I've always had a perception of having to jump between two cultures. You really learn to you can perceive the class and cultural differences. You learn to adapt to kind of whatever situation you're in. My sophomore year, I walked into this cultural house on campus. It's called La Casa Cultural Latina. And they had a newsletter, and I started volunteering there. And I think I started showing up more than the people they were paying. So they offered me a job. And so I ended up being a co-editor with two other lovely women, Latinas. And so that was, it was cool to be doing that and writing and editing. So, and I had my first writing mentor there. Veronica Can, who she worked for the house, and she was the first person who actually told me, like, you could have a career doing this. Oh, you have an interesting way of writing and, storytelling. And I didn't know how to pursue that. I remember taking a creative writing class in college, and I wrote a story, again, because my mom's an immigrant, we as kids would volunteer and help families. And I remember writing a story about an immigrant man who moves to the U.S. from Mexico and kind of like the world through his eyes. I remember I was in a room with all these non-diverse classmates, and they kind of spoke to me like, wow, I never thought to think about like what these people, like what their lives are like. And I think that was kind of the first time I'm like, okay, there's just nothing out there that really says that. I mean, there's a couple of movies, growing up. I think El Norte is like my parents' favorites. Film, La Bamba, there's a couple of films out there, like especially when I was growing up, but very few and far between.
Sure.
So when I didn't see it really out there, that's when you're just filling a need. You don't see yourself. You want to,
you
kind of fill that void. Yeah.
When you were little and you go to school and you're being put into an all English speaking, having only spoken Spanish as a child, and you're realizing, oh, wow, I have to learn this whole new language and learn at the same time. And then you're also learning, oh, and my Spanish isn't quite right either. And you're in the middle of these two. How did that develop as you got older? Where were you on the cultural identity spectrum?
Yeah. I mean, as a kid, you're just a constant identity crisis, right? Like, who am I? Why do I feel wrong in both cultures? But I think, as you mature and you start to take the best of both worlds. And I think that's really for me, I took there's things of both that I really liked. There's things, like machismo that's not, and luckily I'm not from a family that's really, where that's really the case.
It's not a problem.
But I think there's, but I think there's things that you learn to kind of let go of because, they're not right to you. And so the more that I meet people that are authentic and also kind of come from forging their own paths, I think those are the type of people that as an adult I'm more drawn to. But I definitely have, I have two friends. They've been my best friends since I was like 6. And one was from one world and the other's from the other world. And they're still my good friends. But like they would never necessarily hang out on their own. But, they're kind of like my two, they represent my two worlds very much.
So you're bridging them. You are the bridge between the two worlds and actively speaking to it in your writing and in your creative stories and such as you're growing up.
Yeah. And then you learn too to kind of suppress. There's certain things that you suppress in one culture and then there's certain things you suppress in the other. So what's cool about art is you can just put it out there and, like figure out a way, like how do you merge them? And I think for me, art is a lot of finding myself, like who am I as a person and kind of reckoning with, I think that's why I've always kind of been an artist. It's like, how do I take these two worlds and mesh them together in a way that works for me?
Well, did you stay with the psychology? Did you go towards writing?
I graduated with a psychology degree. And then after that, after I graduated, I moved back to my hometown and worked in the school district. And there's a lot more diversity, in those years. Actually, one of the proudest things I've ever done in my life, I co-founded a mentoring group for these 8th grade Latina girls called Chicas, changing how I can achieve success. It's still going on. I think it's in 2 schools now. And I think one of the first girls from the first cohort runs it now. So for me, it's so cool to see. But at the same time, I was like 24, 25, teaching these girls, follow your dreams, do this. And I really was not doing that myself. So I got the opportunity. A friend invited me. She was going to law school in New York and she had like a room open for the summer. So I was like, okay, I'll just go, kind of feel it out. I'm so glad I was so naive. Like I literally went to move to New York with like $2,000 to my name and a dream, like not much else. And then I ended up living there for 5 years and living in New York and figured it out.
Yes. Latina style. Yeah, definitely Latina style. So you loved it. You didn't yearn for going back to your smaller hometown. You love the big city. You love the opportunity.
Yeah. And just the people. And New York is such an interesting place. Even, I've lived now in New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles. The culture is so different in each city for different reasons. So In New York, there's a lot of Puerto Ricans and Dominicans and more, like the Caribbean Latinos. And so it was so cool for me to just learn about those cultures. Just the fact that there's so many different classes and cultures kind of living on top of each other. You really see the full picture of like how everything's connected, even though it doesn't necessarily appear that way. Mm-hmm. So I think that my experience there informs a lot of the types of stories that I tell, because I'm a culture clash of a person. So I love doing that in my work. And New York is definitely a place where that just happens naturally.
New York also has major creativity, lots of filmmaking, lots of studios. Were you leaning towards thinking, okay, here's a place where I could take off in the profession?
What I would tell other people is like, you have to live life in order to be able to write about it. So I think the fact that I was in a new world and learning new things and learning about myself, like who am I when my family is not around or when I don't have the support system. So it definitely made me grow. And I have some friends from that city that they're special people forever because of the things that we went through. We're all finding ourselves.
Yeah, I love that. So yeah, because that's your 20s and you're just extracting yourself out of that hamster wheel of this is what you do next. Then you do this, then you do that. But now you jumped off this ledge of freedom and you spend the time in New York. It's a great place to figure out who you are.
Totally. But it got hard. I was working in education and all of my artists and teacher friends were getting kind of pushed out of Manhattan. So I think it got to the point where I just felt like, why am I here? It feels so hard to just survive here, And so I needed something else. So I moved back to Chicago and I took a writing class. I signed up for a writing class at Second City. And the reason I signed up was because when my last job in New York, I worked for a nonprofit and Tina Fey was our ambassador.
Oh.
Tina Fey from SNL and 30 Rock.
Is there any other Tina Fey? Oh my Lord. So your universe is leading you on, saying, okay, girl, here we go. Come over here.
So she, we had a gala and she was on stage. I didn't get to meet her personally, but she was interviewing my boss at the time. And there's something about the way that she spoke and she was just so sharp and so witty. That I was like, I want that, like, how do I get that? And then going to Chicago, you see the advertisements for Second City and she's all over them. Yeah. So I was like, yeah, if this helped her, why not? So took one class. It was a cold winter in Chicago. So, and it kind of snowballed from there. I met some friends. We started making digital sketches. Yes. Sketch, improv, writing. And then Second City was starting to roll out their own film program. So it was like a year-long filmmaking program. Mm-hmm. And I applied and got accepted into the second cohort ever.
Wow.
So it's called the Harold Ramis Film School at the time.
Congratulations.
No, it was cool. And I just started a full-time job. So I did the program while working a full-time job. So it's literally like Garrett was like a blur. Just working, but feeling so fulfilled, And what's cool about Second City, and I guess the way that they did things, and also the Chicago, it's more indie. So we really get to do a little bit of everything, which I think is so important to be a director or creative, like learning what it feels like to be in the after shoes, learning about editing, learning about sound, like all of these really important aspects of production that all need to come together to tell a cohesive story.
Yeah. More opportunity in Chicago for you to play all the different roles, get really into it.
But we just know more about it because there's more access and there's more education. There's more transparency about what it takes to make content. And it's not a one size fit all. Like people come to it from all walks of life and there's not a direct way to break into the industry. So, and for me, I've kind of come to peace where I just love creating art. A year ago, I received a grant from LaLeaf, and it's funded by Netflix. So it was a grant for $30,000 to make a short film. I cried when I got accepted. Thanks. I mean, the beautiful thing about that...
Jump up and down and scream.
Yeah. And I think like getting accepted to film school and then getting this grant, it's just... I think in both of those applications, I was very, I'm like, hey, I'm bicultural. Like I have a very unique point of view. And I really tried to be authentic in the things that I submitted. And so the fact that they both accepted my weirdness, will be forever grateful. With La Leaf, it was really a big challenge because you're working in basically a simulated studio environment. So you're getting notes from executives. You have all these deliverables to meet.
Wow.
And you have to, build a team and maintain the vision.
The communities, the Latino communities, Black communities, Asian communities talk about breaking in. It's so hard to get in. And we, as the audience, people are thinking, wow, that's just like, there's this heavy weight of Hollywood that won't allow it to be done. And yet you're saying, no, you can get in. You can get your voice, your films, your writing. It's more about you knowing how to get into these different opportunities.
Yeah, I think there's a lot more out there. And also, there's one thing about creating your art and there's another thing about the industry recognizing. Those are two separate kind of things. So I would say if you're trying to make something to get into the industry, it's hard. It's different. Like, I think for me, my journey has just been making stuff that I haven't seen, making stuff that's fulfilling to me, that other people validate or believe in, collaborating with people to come up with things together that we haven't seen and think are interesting. So I think community is so important. My journey was a lot like following my mom, seeing her on the side, kind of building her business, building her own long-term goal. And so for me, it's just like I'm learning, I'm doing it. I don't need permission to. So I encourage anyone who's interested, take a class, find the community. It doesn't matter how, what age you are. I think all of our stories are valid. And it's a lot about collaboration. It's just like learning how to tell an authentic story and finding others who share your passions and creating things together.
Okay. That is worth highlighting right now because it is about, like you say, just doing it for yourself, doing it as part of the process of learning for yourself. And you're setting yourself on a potential for another career path that doesn't just happen overnight, doesn't just happen when you decide you're going to do it. But now La Leaf is Los Angeles. This is the third city.
Yes.
And so where did you go? I'm going to apply La Leaf. And was the Netflix cohort part of that application or was that a second step?
It was kind of the same fellowship. It was funded by Netflix, but taking a couple steps backwards, when the pandemic happened, I think collectively we all had existential crises. So for me, I realized I had gotten so disconnected from my art, the things that brought me joy, that it was kind of a wake-up call to like find that again. And as soon as I started writing, as soon as I really started telling the story, like the hard, difficult stories, like working through my own stuff, but that's when all these doors started opening. So I really leaned into that. I was starting to get meetings with people in LA. There was starting to be some traction with my writing. I signed with my literary manager the day that I arrived in LA. And that was after having months of meetings. And literally he emailed me like the day before we were starting our cross-country journey. We scheduled a call the day that I arrived. So I arrived, there's nothing in my apartment. Like literally I was on my phone, no electricity, and no Wi-Fi. And, so I met with my manager. So yeah.
Oh, that is huge impetus. It's like, that must have felt like, oh my goodness, that was not a leap of faith anymore. In that instant, you're like, I am here where I belong.
Yeah.
Things are going to happen.
And again, everything that since then has just solidified for the both of us.
La Leaf is Los Angeles Latino International Film.
Yes, film festival. It's a film festival. So they have a grant. Yeah, they have a fellowship that's funded through, I think there's a Netflix Creative Fund. And they choose each year, I want to say 10 filmmakers. So you're in a cohort and you have to apply with a script. You have to apply for budget. There's a bunch of different essays. I think I had to submit a video. So there's a lot of application materials. You had to submit something you directed previously. So it just happened that I was at the point where I had all of this material and I was qualified for it. But again, it's like all these things over the years that led up to this moment.
And that you were in your heart, in your soul, lining up for yourself. You were following some kind of intuition because no one was telling you how to do it. And you were exposing yourself to at least the industry, but it sounds like you were always guiding yourself, whether it was the people, the decision making in Second City, being in New York, something was guiding you towards it. And then you get to Los Angeles and you're prepared with something you had written in a very authentic voice. It feels like putting a stake in the ground. Like, this is who I am creatively. This is what I represent. And bingo, that is the voice that got heard. So let's talk about that script. That script that I got to see the movie. And then I'm thinking, everyone has to see this short. This is fantastic. Talk about the script and the short film that came from it in that La Leaf cohort that was sponsored by Netflix.
Yes. So I applied to the fellowship with a script called Development. It's about a Latina professional who advocates for herself to be a part of a leadership seminar, only to realize that all the trainees are expected to become literal clones of the Nepo baby boss. In this journey,
who just happens to be a white man. Shocking.
Yes. And in this journey, she connects with a fellow outsider, and together they must figure out how to stop the cloning. It's a genre smash of things, but the story came to me, again, just feeling like I was going through an existential crisis. I think I was approaching my 40th birthday. And again, I had these kind of dual paths, and I think I just felt very stuck in both, and just feeling like I see people kind of picking one lane and succeeding, and why does it feel like I'm so much slower? And being a certain age, and just feeling like like who am I still? Like what is my future? And so it really came from a place of vulnerability. And again, I have gotten so many other rejections at this point from other projects. I'm like, let me just write. What is the craziest thing that I could write that is so me that no one else could write this way?
But it's also the whole point, right? Isn't that's the whole point of having the podcast for us? It's like, this is where you can be your authentic self. There is no code switching. There is no, okay, now I have to put on, I'm a filmmaker voice or I'm an author voice, and this is what the audience wants to hear. We want to hear the authentic path, the authentic voice that you put out there. But was it, I don't want to be that vulnerable, that kept you from writing in that voice before? Or were you trying to please who was reading it?
I was just trying to tell a story. Who would be like, I come from a working class family, right? Like, who would be my antagonist, or who is someone that I feel like, and it'd be someone who comes from a lot of privilege, who doesn't understand me. From there, I just wanted to kind of show what imposter syndrome felt like. So using clones. And again, I always have a sci-fi brain. My brain's a little broken. So for whatever reason, the whole vision of this story kind of started with me just thinking one day, like, why is it that I know the names of so many white male billionaires they'll never know who I am? They're just always in the media. And like, what would happen if I were to be in a room with one of them? What would I say? Would they know my name? And as soon as I pictured it, I saw myself surrounded by like the same archetype. I was like, that's an interesting thought. So then it's like working backwards. And when I wrote the film originally, it was kind of like, how do we, take down the patriarchy and make a statement? And I think afterward, through the whole journey, I realized, no, it's about imposter syndrome. It's about like the biggest monsters are from within. And how do you kind of work through your own stuff to be your authentic self? So it was definitely very cathartic. And I think it's so allegorical about just what it takes to be an artist and how do you tell your own stories and be yourself.
And have that be the power. That is the superpower, is when you are your authentic self. And we're not going to do any spoilers, right? Because we're going to have people see this short. You are aiming to have into a full feature.
I would say it's more of a sci-fi comedy. And no, the plot is a little different, but I really love the chemistry of the two lead actresses. My star producer, Bia, who's become a dear friend and really saw the vision. She really cared about doing this right. There's special effects components. There's, an accessibility piece. One of the characters is from the deaf and hard of hearing community. And I wrote it for a specific actress, Raquel McRodriguez. But it's based on, a dear friend and just someone who kind of made me see the world in a new way and kind of checked me with my own privilege too. When this actress, that we sent her the script and she accepted, I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Then,
Absolutely.
yes, then Skitty Velasquez, who had just come off of the reboot of Saved by the Bell. She was the lead on that, yes. And was also in the 40-year-old version, yes. So she came on for the lead role of Stephanie and also as a producer. So this is her first project where she decided to be a producer on it as well. And then
I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yes.
She's super great. Really was a full partner in this. She really cared. Again, like saw the vision, really gave herself, brought something super special to the role. And then Sal Lopez, who was someone I'd seen on the TV growing up.
Yes.
Came on to play the role of Stephanie's father, Marcos. And the parent characters are actually named after my parents because, like, when else am I going to be able to, honor them?
Oh, that's awesome.
So,
yes.
Yeah. So I think, and, Leticia Castillo, we cast as Stephanie's mom, Reina, also super brilliant and great. And then the Jeff Lorch, who is the nicest man you could ever cast to play a villain or, like a jerky kind of character.
Right?
Yes.
Right.
So the and I learned so much from the casting process. We actually we worked with ABL Casting, who there's 2 Latino casting directors. So Alan Luna and Natalie Ballesteros. They're the ones who connected us to all this amazing people.
Wow.
But again, it's just it takes a village. And writing something so personal where you feel like I don't know if anyone's ever going to understand this, and the fact that people resonated with it, it just kind of showed me, the more that you put yourself out there in an authentic way, I think people will be drawn to it. What is a thing I can do that no one else can do?
I love this mix because talk about authentic voice. You are the only one. And the most hopeful thing to me in this recent past is meeting you and a lot of research on your fellow cohorts that were part of this group and realizing, oh my gosh, this voice is out there. We are just not having access to it. I love your examples of your writing. And I want to take a moment and we'll just read them out on this episode because I want them to be made. I want to watch these. So you have Monstrosity, an hour-long drama pilot. A teen bruja must join forces with an amnesiac ghost and a reluctant vampire to stop a prophesied apocalypse. I want this to be made. And this is, I see where you are on a pedestal now. This is only you. And you weren't saying that Latinas are the largest population of moviegoers anyway?
We buy the most tickets, we're a dedicated group. So, yeah, definitely.
We want to see it. And Super Lupe. When supernatural forces begin to wreak havoc in her neighborhood, Lupe, a hero hiding as a maintenance worker, this is hitting so many points, must summon her long dormant superpowers to save the city. I think you were Lupe for yourself and reaching this point of writing and having development accepted into the short films. But these are amazing.
Yeah, thank you so much for reading that. And, I'm glad that they resonated with you. And I think part of the reason I'm drawn to genre is because a lot of us Latinas, how we see ourselves, we don't have sometimes a lot of agency in the roles that we get. Or so if you can make someone a superhero or put them in a strange situation, automatically you can give them agency and kind of set them apart and be allegorical. You don't have to be so literal with showing generational trauma or some of the things that we have gone through with our families and past. But there's other ways to play with some of those aspects.
You definitely hit the point. So we get it, but like you're saying, you don't have to pause there and go deep into it. The stereotypical maintenance worker. Let's not stop there. Let's bring out the light, the hope, the future, the opportunity, and go there and change that stereotype. Right.
And Super Lupe, fun fact, I actually made that as my thesis short in film school. So there is a short film and I have, the pilots. I do think that's a character that we haven't seen, even with all the superhero kind of stuff out there. It's someone who's terrified of her power and she's seen as powerless by everyone around her. I love that film so much because I filmed it at my office. They gave me permission to film there. And the actual maintenance, the Latina maintenance worker who, Veronica, she let us use, she saw us rehearsing and I told her about the project. She was a friend. And so she let us use her actual, equipment and uniform. So that was so special. She got a special thanks. But, and then, when I've screened it at places, the people that come up to me to talk about it, it just makes me so happy. And it's more of an ode to, the first gens, the immigrants who come here and like, you don't know what they've been through. And you kind of just see them at face value sometimes. So I really wanted to change the narrative. Where's the Latina Buffy? What's our version of that? Totally.
So I could imagine when people are watching your movies, watching these shorts, and if something resonates, it's like, oh, wow, that's right. I'm still holding myself back. I'm still not being my authentic self because this is making me want to bring it out more, right?
Yeah. And I think you're right on. Even though I tell like fantastical stories, the characters all have really human emotions, and even the monsters and the other types of creatures, it's like they're complex, and I try to make them, three-dimensional. I'm so drawn by how do you show some of these things you can't see or can't touch in society. And that is kind of just what I'm drawn to as a creative.
Yeah, they're fantastic because just personally, and everyone's going to be different. I think that's the beauty of what you're putting out there. It's very open for everyone to have their own personal experience with it, have their own personal experience in understanding what you're portraying. But yet, I would say, personally for me, that's like, okay, I've lived that monstrosity as with my own siblings. They're the monsters. They're the ones that are just creating this, oh my goodness, hellacious world. Yeah, I would want to be the slayer. I would be that slayer. And
I think you are. I think you are in a very non-literal sense, but I think you carry that spirit.
Yeah.
And yes. With writing, they say that sometimes the more authentic that you make something, the more universal it is. So I think those things where, you can have these made up characters, but you give them your flaws, you give them, hopes and dreams and challenges. And that's what people are drawn to.
Yeah, we see ourselves in that because you're not interested in someone who's perfect and has it all and it's so easy. It's like, yeah, right, whatever. That's not real.
Like I've really put in the work to study, to learn the crafts. And again, the industry, it's changing, but it's not just the one thing that you make. You have to keep creating. You have to learn. Like rejection is 99% of the experience, and it's all the things you don't see.
Oh, that sounds so insanely difficult to put yourself through over and over. But then the power of the passion that makes it, okay, just part of the process. Like accepting this is part of the process, but at least I get to get my work out there, my voice out there, my authenticity out there. What can we do as the audience, as potential investors, as affecting change to have the Latina and the Latino filmmakers work brought out to more accessible?
As a community, number one, nurture the artists. They're there. They're the kids. They're the neighbors. They're our cousins. So nurture the artists. Number one, encourage them to do it. Yes. Mm-hmm. And number two, like what we consume. We do have shows, support them, watch them, building that base, having a dedicated base. And not every Latino show is going to be for all of us either. Just don't watch the things that feel like they're pandering to us.
Right. There's a difference. Find the difference. Like just because they're on the screen doesn't mean that it came from an authentic voice, genuine voice.
Right.
How do you see your life changing now? Are you entering into ownership of a different Chloe than you've been in the past?
Definitely. I think this year there's been so much change and self-empowerment for me. So a lot of it is, holding on to the things, the same as, my journey with my identity, like holding on to the things that are serving me, that are positive, and sometimes letting go of things that aren't. And now I'm at the point where I kind of have a better sense of who I am and what I want to do. So being more intentional with the steps that I'm taking to get there and trying to do it with as much, love and care and consideration as possible.
That sounds beautiful.
Letting go of what it looks like or what it's supposed to look like or what it's supposed to be, and just being present in your life and, on your path.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, absolutely love that. That is so strong. That's going to be your quote. That's going to be that's going to resonate with everybody. For so long. You always have visions. You can really obviously manifest the visions you have as your creative side. What do you see for yourself? What is like the furthest out there that you just like, yeah, what did that happen? What does that look like?
I would love to direct movies, or would love to direct like a feature that I wrote. So I think that putting that energy out there, and how it happens, it doesn't it can just be an indie movie. It can be something small, and continuing to collaborate and tell unconventional stories. Like I don't try to limit myself with what I need to do or how it needs to happen. So just continuing to learn and be involved somehow in telling those stories. It's just personally gratifying to me.
If you'd like people to reach out, what's the best way to reach out to you on, and any social media you'd like to mention?
Sure. On the gram, I'm coco.loca, to my mother's horror. And my website is www.coco-loca.com. If there's anything that I can get through, it's like this. It's been a journey for me to get here, and I'm so proud of all the things, little imperfect things I've made on the way to development too. It's something I'm learning, I'm growing. So I'm just enjoying the ride, and definitely if anything speaks to you, happy to hear it always.
Awesome. You're a pleasure. Oh my God, absolute pleasure. Love this. Do you have a favorite cafecito place?
I do. It's Picaresca Barra de Café. It's here in LA. I want to say Boyle Heights. So they have a little pop-up at Silver Lake, but they're Latino owned coffee shop. So they have this awesome cafe de olla. So.
Is that your favorite then?
Oh, I love it. I try to do a ripoff at home, but it's not the same.
And that's why we thank God they have them.
Yeah.
This has been absolutely fantastic. You speak to such a wide breadth of the human condition and actual life, but I love your positivity. That is your authentic voice. I really appreciate that you have this platform to bring that out.
And I appreciate you too. Same. I feel like when we met, we definitely, you're a kindred spirit. You're also putting something that doesn't exist into the world that's much needed. When you're connected to your purpose, that's when it flourishes.
It is fueling. Yeah. I love how we showed up in matching furs too. It's of course you did. Of course you did. Oh, that was such a fun night. And that was New Filmmakers in Los Angeles. Well, I really, really appreciate you sharing so much with us in your authentic voice, in your genuine view on the world. It has been an exciting episode, and that hope and positivity of what's coming. So thank you so, so very much.
Yeah, thank you so much for finding me. I feel like this was, was meant to be, and always a pleasure chatting with you. And I'm so excited for where this goes.
Chloe Caudillo, Latina filmmaker, and so much more. A beautiful mujer with a deep, soulful spirit, reminding us to follow our dream by staying present in our everyday. That can be so hard, so difficult, when you think your present day is maybe just answering emails, meeting deadlines, and making sure you hydrate, right? There's so much more to it. Her joyful persistence and positivity is exactly the voice we want behind the films and screenwritings that she's bringing to life. Do we really want to see another version of Planet of the Apes? Or do we want to see a story where we feel seen and understood? That is not a tough choice. We are so lucky, truly blessed, that Chloe insisted on her authenticity on a big platform, because that's where we can join in and be reminded of our power, and yes, even in her screenwriting, our Latina superpower. So join us next week for our Pod Club episode, where we focus in on the gems we heard here today from Chloe and how it applies to our everyday. These are the takeaways consolidated into a 15-minute episode that you can carry with you all the time. And let's act on the one ask from Chloe and other Latina filmmakers you will hear this season when it comes to our role in the comunidad. So take a moment this week and seek out the Latina films on the streaming platforms. You're going to be surprised. Once you start doing a deep dive, there are a lot of short films out there. And once you watch one, maybe 10 or 15-minute amazing film, that AI will start introducing you to one after the other, and you will be hooked. You will be hooked. You will be so happy. One, that they're there. Two, that you could replace yourself into these movies easily. But it is up to us to discover them, watch them, and follow the filmmakers, the actors, and the crew in solidarity so that they can keep doing their dream, which is entirely benefiting all of us on the other side of the camera. So join us next week in our Pod Club episode, and let's see what films you discover this week. Always appreciate you in this community. You are everything, and together we are glorious. We are powerful, and we are changing how things have been done. Share this podcast with your friends and family, drop a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, and then follow or subscribe on it so that you don't miss a single episode of the amazing Latinas that you will love to know. We are your 100% Latina representation platform. Love to hear your ideas. And if you have someone you would love to hear on the show, then reach out to us on Instagram, Encuentras Your Voice, and we will work our magic. Until next week, step into your truth, ladies. Ciao! Be sure to follow and subscribe to the Encuentras Your Voice podcast so you don't miss a single episode. They will automatically drop into your listening device each week, and we'd really, really appreciate if you take a moment to add to the reviews that we already have. Tell us what you like, tell us what you're hoping to hear, and we will get there. Share this with your friends and family to help us grow our comunidad, and keep following us on our social media. Encuentras Your Voice. We are so grateful to you for helping us grow this community and would love to learn of all the amazing Latinas who you know are creating the world we thrive in. So reach out to me on social media at Encuentras Your Voice, and let's keep leaning into our authenticity in pride. Help us make Encuentras Your Voice the place where you are 100% represented.